Okay, let's start.
3, 2, 1. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in to this session of the Fireside Chat. Today, we have Mr. Siva Shanker. He's the CEO of Rahim & Co. Realty, the estate agency at Rahim & Co. International, Sdn Bhd. Welcome, Siva. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Ernest. Thank you very much for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Siva, knowing that you're a very busy person, and I know that you've taken a very brief moment to come and share your thoughts with us, I wanted to get straight to the point. And the point I wanted to get at is, based on your knowledge and based on the fact that you've been in the real estate line for, I think, 3+ decades already, is real estate a get-rich-quick scheme?
Okay, thank you, Ernest. That's a loaded question. If you look at the advertisements or the sponsored content in Facebook, as well as I'm sure much of the other social media, you will realize that there is so much talk about real estate and how to get rich quick with real estate. To me, these are nothing but controversial scheme cepat kaya. Let me tell you something. Everybody who wants to get into real estate has to realize one thing very quickly. Real estate investment is a long-term play. And if you're not prepared to go the long-term with real estate investment, there is every chance that you could lose everything you ever spent your whole life building. Of course, you may be lucky and you may make money. Sure. I mean, in every scheme cepat kaya, there are some people who make money and then many, many others who lose. So if you happen to be one of the lucky ones who made money from these short-term real estate investments, then you are the rare lucky ones. On average, most people would lose money if they try to look at real estate as a quick flip situation. And all this talk about below market value properties, they're just nothing but a myth. Let me tell you this, it's nothing but a myth. Nobody would want to sell their property below market value. Nobody. Unless they were so desperate and they were losing their pens and they had to, get rid of it quickly. And if that was the case, then they would go to real estate agents to get rid of the property quickly, not to these so-called property investment gurus who nobody knows about. And how have you ever wondered how it is miraculous that only these guys get all the below market value properties? It's amazing. The rest of us never see them. But these guys, these few guys who talk about below market value properties, they seem to have the lion's share. In fact, they seem to have every single property that's below market is with them, or every property they have is below market. So my advice, stop listening to these people. They're nothing but conmen in a suit.
Siva, I know that you've actually mentored and guided and counseled many, many people who started on their property journey per se. Can I just get a distilled sense of advice? If I'm a new home buyer, meaning I'm coming out to the market right now, what do I pay attention to? What advice do I have to start on this journey? Because I look at all the other asset classes in town, and I look at everything that's currently happening with the economic cycle and the pandemic. A lot of people tell me it's a great time to buy. A lot of people also tell me it's a terrible time. People are losing jobs. Be careful. What would your advice be to these people who are starting their journey?
Yes. Okay. This pandemic is a game changer. It's a real game changer. The COVID-19 has become a bigger economic problem than it ever could have been a medical problem. So we are balancing now lives versus livelihood. Unfortunately, there's no answer. There's no real answer. There's no real balance. So every country in the world has to balance it the best you can. COVID-19 has affected the real estate market as well. In fact, it will continue to ravage the real estate market as well as the economy. The market in the first half of 2020 fell by close to 30% in terms of both value as well as volume. every sector fell. Residential, industrial, commercial, every sector fell. Every sector is more or less oversupplied. The industrial sector is probably the one that's closest to equilibrium. Of course, it's not very sexy. You don't get great returns. You don't get great immediate returns on industrial. You get very steady, strong returns over a long period of time. But unfortunately, Malaysians are not interested in strong and steady growth. They want orgasmic kind of growth. They want a growth that goes this way, not a growth that goes this way. And in a rising market like what we had in 2010, 2011, and 2012, then you could have a market that goes this way, where some properties went up by as much as 30, 35%. But from 2012 onwards, right up to 2017, the market's been on a downslide. 2018 and 2019 saw it recover, but 2020 put paid to that with COVID. So we've lost 30% of market share compared to the first half of last year. Will the market recover in the second half? It's very hard to say. No analyst would be prepared to put money down on it. And this is the surprising thing, all those so-called property investment gurus who claim that the market will behave this way and behave that way, I wonder where they got their intelligence from, because I can't make a judgment call, and neither can any of my other fellow bona fide real estate agents and consultants. So the only people who are able to make these predictions are those people who are peddling the get-rich-quick schemes. So what I think may happen is the best scenario we could hope for is the second half of 2020 is flat. If it's not down, it's already a good thing. It's flat. And if all things being equal, if we don't see a third wave and a fourth wave and a fifth wave, then I think maybe 2021, 2022 has a chance of very slow but small recovery as the world generally gets to grips with COVID, accepts COVID for what it is, understands that it will be around for a while, and moves on with our lives nevertheless. Therefore, livelihoods and life finds a balance. I think it'll need another year or so before balance is found. Of course, if the vaccine is found, if a successful vaccine is found and that announcement comes, I think the positive feel-good factor itself will drive the market forward, will propel the market through no fundamentals on it, but the market will just be propelled on the news of the vaccine. But if we expect COVID to go away as soon as the vaccine is found, again, we are dreaming. I think it's going to take years to vaccinate 7.6 billion people, many of whom live in very inhospitable, inaccessible locations around the world. So, again, like I said, if you look at it as a long-term play, if you buy properties now, you may be able to buy some properties a little bit cheaper now. I've seen property prices come down in some sectors. I'm sure it's going to come down even more, especially in those sectors with overhangs. And if you look at it as a 3-year, 4-year, 5-year, 10-year, 20-year plan, then you will see very good returns from your property. If you think you want to buy something in October and then flip it in February, you're going to be sorely disappointed, and you're going to be tested very badly.
So, Siva, one of the questions that I wanted to ask in relation to what you said, which is, I think, a very good overall view as to where the market is going to be headed this year and also for the next 1 or 2 years. But do you see that maybe lives have changed because of COVID? People work from home. Digitization is everywhere. The need for dwellings, the need for office space, the need for even retail space may change somewhat, and because developments don't happen immediately. So what about projects that are already being built to cater to what the demand they thought would be, or the developers thought would be? Do you think these are going to be white elephants?
Well, see, one of the bad things in the Malaysian real estate market, of course, is the gestation period. See, when a developer buys a property, he buys it, let's say he buys it in 2020, buys it now. And he thinks in his mind, okay, the serviced apartment is doing really well. I'm going to build service apartments, and therefore I'm going to buy this piece of land. By the time the transaction is completed, it's a year. Then by the time he applies and gets all his permits and all his approvals and everything, it's another year. And then if he launches it immediately, he's already on year 3, launching a project whose demand was strong in year 0. And if the market did not change, if the market is rising, then he's okay. But if the market changed and the market's not rising anymore, then he's in a very bad place. But he cannot now do anything about it because he's invested in it. He's invested, he's stuck. So he goes ahead and builds it anyway, therefore contributing even more to the overhang, which already built up over the last 2 years unknown to him. So now everybody says, why is this guy doing this? But he invested in this 3 years ago, not today. He has no choice but to go on with this. So now all this can be averted if we can shorten that process from 2 years to a few months. Why can't we do it? Why can't we do it? Of course we can. We need to stop being a third world country and move on, get on with things. And if we can shorten it to 6 months, then the developer has a better chance of launching properties that are suitable for the market.
I think that's a very great piece of advice to actually launch timely products for a timely category that needs it, rather than wait it out and hopefully people still want it when there's other options already in the market or people's tastes have moved on already. I wanted to ask you, Siva, do you think that there'll be a growing class of renters moving forward because livelihoods and work may not necessarily be a 9-to-5, 30-year career moving forward with the Gen Ys and the Gen Zs and the Alphas, because it's going to be so unpredictable. And because of that, home ownership per se, which requires a 30, 40-year loan, may not be able to be sustained because of that. Do you see this as a new shift in how properties are consumed in Malaysia?
I think this is a new shift of how things are going to be all over the world. The millennials think differently from the Gen X and Gen baby boomers and even Gen Y. The millennials are different. They're different animals. They don't mind a nomadic lifestyle, not just in terms of where they live. They also don't mind a nomadic lifestyle where they work. You see, previously in my father's generation, he only worked for one employer his entire life. He started one job and he retired in that same place, be it government servant or the private sector. Now, during my time, I have some of that mindset still. So I would move jobs perhaps, but I would move maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 jobs in my lifetime. The new millennials, they can move jobs once every 2 months or once every months or whatever at the drop of a hat. You piss them off, they leave immediately without having another job. It's okay. They can leave because they're used to it. They have that nomadic mindset. So the same thing, they may rent an apartment, and in a year, if there's another option somewhere, they'll just move to that option, and then they can move to another option and another option, and as completely as opposed to people who are my generation and older, maybe who lived in the same place forever. So yeah, so those things have changed the way people buy properties. Co-living has now become popular, where if you can't afford to buy a property yourself, you got 3 friends together and 4 of you shared and bought a property. So co-living is the residential equivalent of co-working, where if you can't afford an office, you went and rented a beanbag or a cubicle from someone for very little money. So co-living is going to throw a spanner in the works. The inability to get loans is going to be a big issue as far as housing is concerned. The oversupply is certainly going to affect everybody. Look, there's 50,000 units which are oversupplied. If you take the serviced apartment and the residential apartments together, it's 50 over 1,000. If you take another 35 plus thousand which are being constructed, that's 80 over 1,000, close to 90. And then none of us have thought about this. Take the other 100 or so thousand of people who bought these properties in the last 5 years on speculation because some joker told them that they can flip it when it was completed, or maybe even rent it for a positive cash flow. And those people who can't afford it now are putting their property into the market. So if you really look at it, I think at any one time there could be close to 200,000 units that are floating in the market, which are looking for an owner or a tenant. That's a lot of units. And that, I think, is a 10-year mop-up.
And that is looking at no more new launches. And if you have new launches in there.
The good news, of course, is in the last year or so, the launches have slowed down. So at least that's good news. I think we should slow it down some more. But the problem is, like I mentioned to you, the developer is already invested from a few years ago. So he does the best he can, I suppose.
Okay.
But the other thing that's going to cause havoc in the market is all these properties that are now being offered on no down payment, money back guarantee, and cashback guarantee, positive cash flow upon rentals, 100% loan. I shudder to think how the only way you can get positive cash flow on a residential property today, no matter where it is and what kind of property it is, the only way you get positive cash flow is if your borrowings was 30 or 40 or 50%. If you borrowed 70, 80 or 90 or 100%, like how people are normally doing, you show me, if you dare, show me one project that will eventually give you positive cash flow when you minus off your housing loan repayment to the bank. Forget about service charge. You got housing loan, you got service charge, you got insurance, you got quit rent, you got assessment, you got all kinds of things. But nobody talks about any of these. When they do the charts that show you a positive cash flow, they probably show you a positive cash flow based on 50% borrowings. Yeah, sure. If you borrow 50%, then you probably on a positive cash flow based on your rent. That is, if you could get a tenant. Yeah. So all the graphs and charts that are being shown are on the basis that you get a tenant from day one. If it takes you 6 months to get a tenant, you need double the rent just to cover for the first 6 months that have gone by. Yeah. And people are more and more now taking on rents which are just 1 year. No, it's gone are the days of 2 years and 3 years. They only take 1 year because at the end of that year, they can easily move next door for a cheaper rent.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So all these people who are espousing all this, we need to really, we need to educate the market to really question them and understand what exactly are they being fed? What are they selling?
I concur with you, Siva. I think what is important is actually to take all this information and put it through a filter that you yourself analyze the information rather than eating it wholesale. You've got to really understand what is being taught, what is being said, what is being promoted, and do an acid test. Talk to people in the market, people like yourselves, to say like, does this make sense or not? Can or not? Or just go and see other popular websites whether the rental rates actually are at the numbers that have been quoted. I know that
very careful. Yeah, be very careful about what's being promised you. I think 90% of what's being promised to the market out there is false. It's not real. Well, okay, maybe not 90%, but 70, 60, 70, 80% for sure. Because nobody is being told that property is a long-term play. Everybody is being told that you can become instant millionaires.
Well, I personally, I think I've seen some of the postings that you've mentioned, and also some of my friends in the industry have also said, wow, the cashbacks, and there are some developments that come with cashbacks. And a quick way to make a lot of money very quickly is you get 3 or 4 and you do a multiple submission. I think this is an open secret. And then that's where you cash out and you are an instantaneous millionaire. But that's not free money. It's still money that you owe to the bank.
Yes, exactly. And you know, nothing's free. Nothing is free. Everything costs money. And nobody is going to give you money unless they already factored it in the first place, you know. Nobody is going to give you a rental guarantee unless they factored in vacancies and uncertainties into their price in the first place. Even the DIBS, which was being offered for many years. And everybody thought, oh, interest-bearing, interest-free scheme. But it's not interest-free scheme. Somebody has to pay the interest, and it's usually you. You're paying your own interest, except that you've paid it upfront to someone, and then they pay it off for you for 3 years.
Understood. I know that you've got to run, so I'm going to ask probably another question that comes back to your initial thought, which is below market value. I've been looking and tracking the auctions market per se.
Yeah.
And there are some properties who have gone to auctions not once, not twice, 3 times or even more, and they still cannot find a strike price.
Yeah.
Does that mean, assuming that there's nothing wrong with the property, that means there's nothing onto it that's happened to the property, is that not an indication that the property itself is overvalued?
It certainly is yes, it certainly is an indication. You see, and here's the thing, that even in the sub-sale, even in the secondary market, people are thinking that property prices have dropped by 30% because what happens is this. Here's the thing. You buy a property for 700,000, which is actually only worth 500. But because of all these cashback schemes and these schemes, 100% loan and whatever not, you had to pay 700 for it. And then some smart aleck told you that in 2 years' time, when it's completed, you can sell it for 900,000 and therefore make 300,000 or 400,000 in profit. And then you jump all over the place and you buy it. 3 years comes, the market is downwards, and you and through to advice, you place the property into the market for 900, and nobody buys. Then you place it for 850, nobody buys. Then you place it for 800, then 750, then 700. The price keeps going down. And to the average man on the street, he looks at the advertisements either in the newspaper or on the internet, and he says, oh my God, prices in this location has dropped by 30%. But actually the prices never drop. The asking price dropped by 30%. There's a big difference between a transacted price and an asking price. The asking price, I always say, is nothing but a reflection of the owner's greed and ignorance. Nobody who is in the real estate market is stupid enough to buy at a price which you think is reasonable. They will buy at the market price. They will do their research. There is so many tools to research these things now. So yeah. So when it goes into auction, number one, it may not have been marketed properly for all you know, right? Number two, it may be a lousy property in a lousy location, which is why it came into auction in the first place. And number three, it may have been grossly overpriced at the onset, which is why you had to come back again and again and again for the price to be reduced and until a equilibrium between buyer and seller is reached. Yeah.
Siva, for those fellows who have been caught up in this multiple property purchase at one go scheme or programs, now that they're picking up the keys, do you have any practical advice for them? How can they save themselves if they need to save themselves?
Pray lah, pray. Because you've made a terrible mistake. You have listened to dubious advice from dubious credentialed people, and you've bought properties way above your means. You need to face it now. So if you're really stuck in a position like this, here are two things that you can do. Number one, bring your price down to a reasonable level. You see, if an investor or a buyer is going to buy a property today in this market scenario, he will need something from it. If he's going to buy at just market value, why does he need to buy from you? He can buy from thousands of people. He's emerged as a new investor during trying times because he sees the opportunity for a better than average profit. So you will have to sell the property at slightly below prices. So you've got to sell your property at a price which makes it now reasonable for the investor to say, okay, I'm gaining something here, I'll take it. Or you could then put it in the market for rent and then reduce your rent accordingly so that it became exciting enough, attractive enough for a tenant to take it from you. And then at least that money you get from the rent will partially cover the bank. And hopefully you can come up with the rest of it from your pocket, just so that you can tide yourself over for the next 2 years or so until the market recovers and you're able to sell the property at a better price. Yeah, take a bit of a beating now so that you will save yourself in the future.
So either lose the battle but win the war. Always never take your eye off the ball.
That's right.
The war. Okay.
That's right. That's right.
Siva, last
then
question.
most importantly, from now on, stop listening to people who promise you instant riches, because it does not exist.
For our viewers and for the people who are starting on their property journey now, Siva, if they're wanting to brave out there, can I just ask you to just backtrack a little bit? Siva, if you were in the market now, buying your first property with all the knowledge and information that you have right now, what would your steps be to buy your first property?
Look, my steps would be very simple. I would location may not be everything now. Branding, positioning, services, pricing strategy, these all come into consideration. I think what you need to do is study the market, stay away from oversupplied properties if you can. You can still buy them, but provided you're prepared to hold them for longer periods of time. So get a good developer, get a good property in a good location, stay away from oversupplied properties, stay away from overpriced properties. Don't fall for all these gimmicks. If you're going to buy a property, do the right thing, pay your 10% or 20% down, go and get a loan from the bank, and then finance it through the loan. Have extra money to pay for all these other things, for the loan documentation, legal fees, stamp duty, and everything else. If you don't have money for all this and you're expecting to get the property for cash for free, then you can be sure that all this is added on to your property already. So if you do that, and most importantly in today's bad market, is adopting a long-term attitude. If you adopt a long-term attitude and you follow these little pieces of advice that I've given you, you should be okay.
That's fantastic advice, Siva. Just one slight tag on. Would you be more partial to brand new or primary market or sub-sale properties?
Oh, this is a completely another set of discussions. They both have their strengths. Yeah, I mean, there are some pros and cons on each one. It's very hard for me to make that judgment call. I think it requires the individual to understand his own needs, understand his own requirements and his own wants, and make that judgment call. Look, for those of you who are unable to, make that judgment call or unable to analyze this, go and find yourself a good registered estate agent. Stay away from the so-called peddlers of quick rich scheme. Stick with the registered, credentialed estate agents, and you will get decent advice.
Yeah, and you can also check their rent numbers, right? You can go to the LPPH website and just check the rent.
That's right. You can check their registration numbers, whether they were real estate negotiators or real estate agents, by going to the website of the board. If you are still in doubt, you can call the Malaysian Institute of Estate Agents and ask them to help you, and they, I think, would be prepared to help you.
Thank you so much, Siva Shanker, for spending your precious time with us to help educate our watchers and our viewers to make better financial decisions on their journey towards real estate. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a fireside chat presentation. Thank you again, and thank you again to Mr. Siva Shanker. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.